Welcome to From Dorms to Desks, job hunting tips for those early in their careers, a podcast brought to you by College Recruiter job search site, which believes that every student and recent grad deserves a great career, and hosted by Work Defined. Join our AI co-hosts as they dive into tips, tricks, and insights that will help you land your next part-time, seasonal, internship, or entry-level job. Let's get your career started.
All right, it is. Let me check. Tuesday, February 3rd, 2026. And if you're like a lot of people, you probably made a bold New Year's resolution to find a new job or maybe, finally snag that VP title. Well, we have officially entered the danger zone.
The danger zone? That sounds traumatic.
Oh, you know exactly what I mean. The January surge is over. You came out of the gate swinging 4 weeks ago. You polished the LinkedIn profile, send out the first 10 applications, and now what?
Crickets.
Silence. It's been weeks, and that new year, new me energy is fading, and the same old market reality is, well, it's setting in. It feels stalled.
It is a very real thing. Statistically, job search momentum it drops off a cliff in week 5 of the year. People start thinking, maybe it's me.
Right. Maybe the market's dead.
Maybe I should just stay put.
Yeah. But according to the research we're diving into today, the market isn't dead at all. The game has just changed, and most people are still playing by the old rules.
That's it, exactly. They're playing by, 2020 rules in a 2026 world.
So today's deep dive is all about breaking that stall. We're looking at a really comprehensive guide from College Recruiter. The title is Start 2026 with Proof. And that title alone, I think, signals a pretty massive shift in mindset.
It does.
We are not spending today talking about font sizes or resume keywords or, how to beat the bots.
No, definitely not. The core argument here is actually, it's a bit provocative. The source material suggests that in the 2026 hiring landscape, the resume has become, it's almost a formality.
Just a piece of paper.
It's just a piece of paper. The central thesis is that if you really want to get hired, especially for those competitive roles, you have to stop acting like an applicant and start acting like a consultant.
A consultant. Okay, that's the hook.
Yeah.
So the mission for this deep dive is to move you away from that polish and pray strategy.
Right.
Towards something the sources call an evidence-based approach.
Right. And to really get why this works, you have to get inside the hiring manager's head. The experts in this guide, they argue that employers aren't looking for credentials anymore, or even potential. Those are too vague. They're looking for one thing: readiness.
Which brings us to this whole concept of risk.
Exactly. Every single new hire is a gamble. It doesn't matter how nice you are in an interview or, where you went to school. The manager's thinking, will they fit? Can they actually do the work?
Or am I going to spend the next 6 months hand-holding them?
And fixing your mistakes. Yes, that's the fear.
It sounds a bit cynical, but reduced risk is basically the currency of the labor market right now.
It absolutely is. And the source material argues the interview process isn't a quiz. It's not about getting the right answers. It's a business proposal. You are proposing that you can solve their problems and you can do it immediately. Your job is to provide the evidence, the proof, that lowers that risk to almost zero.
So instead of saying, please hire me, I'm a hard worker, it's more like, here is my business case and here are the receipts.
Precisely. You shift the entire dynamic from asking for a favor to offering a service.
We have 16 distinct strategies to cover today. So to make this digestible, we've grouped them into 3 big themes. First, concrete execution. Then, strategic deliverables, which is basically doing the job before you get it. And finally, this idea of psychological persuasion.
Okay, let's start with concrete execution.
Yeah, this is the section where we witness the death of the vague claim. The source explicitly talks about showing receipts. And I love that metaphor because we use it all the time in pop culture, but rarely in a job interview.
It's a great metaphor. It comes from Miriam Groom in the guide. And her argument is that candidates have been trained, and badly trained, I might add, to use these fluffy, empty buzzwords. I'm a strong communicator. I'm a team player. I'm a problem solver.
I think I have all 3 of those on my LinkedIn profile right now. I feel a little attacked.
Huh. Most people do. But in 2026, without a receipt, those words are they're noise. Because anyone can say them. If I tell you I'm funny, you might not believe me. If I tell you a joke and you laugh, I've proved it. That's a receipt.
The guide uses this really compelling case study of a guy named Alex. I think this story is going to resonate with a lot of listeners who feel, underqualified on paper.
Oh, yeah.
He was a recent grad trying to land a marketing role, and normally the barrier to entry there is 3 to 5 years of agency experience, right?
Usually, yes. That's the standard gatekeeper.
But Alex landed a full-time role in 6 weeks without that experience.
Because he ignored the experience requirement and focused on the proof requirement.
Exactly. So he had grown a student newsletter.
Right.
Now, on a normal resume, that's one bullet point, right? Managed student newsletter.
Maybe he'd add demonstrated strong communication skills.
Which tells the employer absolutely nothing.
Nothing about his capability, no.
But Alex brought the receipts. He grew it from 300 to 1,200 subscribers. But he didn't just list the numbers. He explained the mechanism.
And that distinction is so key, the mechanism.
He walked the interviewers through how he rewrote subject lines to increase the open rates. He showed them the specific tools he used for A/B testing. He showed them the spreadsheets where he tracked the data. He basically said, here is the engine I built.
That is a perfect example of what the source calls concrete execution details. And here's why that matters. And we actually have data on this. The National Association of Colleges and Employers, and NACE, they did the research, and they found that while employers say they want traits like problem solving and teamwork, those traits don't actually register in the interviewer's brain unless they're backed by a specific story, a narrative.
So just saying, I'm a problem solver is literally wasted breath.
Essentially, yes, it just glides right over them. In fact, the source notes that candidates who provide specific success metrics, like Alex did with his subscriber count and open rates, they're rated 40% more favorably than those who just stick to generalities.
40%? Wow. That is a massive edge. You're not just slightly better at that point?
No, you're in a different category. You're playing a different sport.
You're shifting from, like, abstract candidate to concrete solution. You become real to them.
That's it.
Okay, but I can hear someone listening right now saying, I'm not in marketing. I don't have open rates. I'm an admin or I'm a project manager. How do I format this?
Right.
Kimberly Tyler Smith offers this really tactical tool in the guide. She calls it the 10-line skills receipt.
I love this format because it forces you to be disciplined. You can use it in a cover letter, a LinkedIn message, or just use it to structure your interview answers.
So the formula is problem, what I did, tools, result, and then what I learned.
What does it really take to lead with impact in today's ever-evolving world? Welcome to Inside the C-Suite, the podcast where influence, energy, innovation, and empathy converge. Hi, I'm Christy Honeycutt, your host. Join me as I sit down with the boldest voices in leadership, visionaries who are not just making decisions, but making a difference. In every episode, we explore the heart of leadership. How do high-performing leaders harness their energy? How do they lead with empathy without losing their edge? How do they turn disruption into innovation and pressure into purpose? You'll hear unfiltered stories of adversity, resilience, and the raw moments that shaped true influence. This isn't about perfection. It's about presence, passion, and the energetic exchange that fuels transformation. Inside the C-Suite is your invitation to lead from a deeper place, with intention, connection, and courage. If you're ready to go beyond the surface and unlock what really moves leaders to action, hit subscribe and step inside. You can find us wherever you get your podcast fix. Inside the C-Suite, well, we're an energetic exchange. Let's lead with influence, live with energy, and create with empathy.
It sounds simple, but you should try doing it. It's actually hard because you have to strip away all the fluff.
So let's look at the example from the text. Instead of, managed customer service inquiries, which is just a duty, the receipt looks like this. Problem. Response times were lagging at 48 hours.
Okay.
What I did. Audited the intake workflow and implemented auto routing. Tools. Zendesk and Zapier. Result. Cut response time to 12 hours. And then what I learned, automation is useless without first refining the process.
You see the difference. That's not a claim. That is a cause and effect story. It tells the employer, I identify inefficiencies, I know the tools to fix them, and I deliver time back to the company.
It totally transforms you from a passive participant, someone who just answers the phone, to an active problem solver.
And that what I learned part at the end, that is the cherry on top. It shows you reflect on your work. It shows you aren't just pushing buttons, you're analyzing the system. That's that consultant mindset we talked about.
Which leads us perfectly into our second theme. If the first theme is about describing what you did in the past, this next one is about showing what you will do in the future. We're calling it doing the job before you get the job.
This is where we really lean into that risk reduction strategy. Several experts in the guide, Tejal Shampag and Abhishek Shah, they talk about the power of the 30, 60, 90-day plan.
Now, I've heard of these for, like, executive roles, VP of sales, a CEO.
Yeah.
You bring a plan. But the source suggests this is for everyone now, even mid-level or junior roles.
Absolutely. And here's why. The market is just faster now. Companies don't have 3 months to ramp you up. So the idea is to bring a document, physical or digital, that breaks down your first 3 months. Day 30 is usually learn and observe. Day 60 is fix or build. And day 90 is deliver measurable impact.
Is this just effective because it shows you're organized? Or is there something else going on psychologically?
It's way more than that. It shifts the power dynamic.
Right.
Tejal Shampag notes that when a candidate pulls out a 30, 60, 90 plan, the conversation instantly changes. You stop being the interviewee answering questions about your greatest weakness.
Okay.
You become an operator discussing strategy. You're suddenly sitting on the same side of the table as them.
You're saying, here's how I see the challenges, and here's my plan to tackle them. It answers the hiring manager's biggest secret fear, which is, does this person actually understand what the job is?
Exactly. If you show them a plan that uses their terminology and addresses their actual bottlenecks, you've answered that question before they even ask it.
Okay, let me play devil's advocate for a second. Isn't there a risk of doing free work or guessing wrong? What if your plan is totally off base because you don't work there yet?
That's a valid fear, but the experts argue that being wrong is actually okay.
Really? Being wrong is okay?
Yes, because even if your specific tactic is wrong, say, you suggest a software tool they hate or a workflow they just got rid of. The fact that you have a plan shows how you think. It lets the hiring manager say, oh, actually, we don't use X, we use Y. And now you're having a real work conversation. You're collaborating, which is so much better than a stiff Q&A where you're just nodding your head.
That makes a ton of sense. It's a conversation starter, not a legally binding contract. Now, Colin McIntosh takes this idea and he dials it up to 11. He suggests the unasked for project.
Ah, yes. The high risk, high reward play.
Yeah, the idea is you come to the interview with a fully baked project, not something they asked for, something you did in your spare time just because you were researching the company.
McIntosh notes that this signals values that are almost impossible to screen for in a normal interview. Things like autonomy, motivation, real curiosity.
And if you've already done work for them, it helps the team visualize you as a coworker. You're not an outsider anymore. You're the person who fixed that workflow dilemma or proposed that new marketing angle.
And it can be small, too. For an operations role, maybe you noticed a broken link on their intake form, you fix it, or you propose the fix, you show up as the solution.
And George Fironov adds a really important nuance here about real output. He says, don't just bring a polished, perfect PDF. Bring the messy stuff.
The messy stuff.
Yeah, especially for tech or remote roles. Bring the Notion docs, the GitHub repository. Record a Loom video where you walk through your logic. He argues that in a modern work environment, employers care more about your process, how you prioritize, how you troubleshoot, than just seeing a glossy final image.
That is such a good point. A Loom video where I explain why I chose a certain design or how I debugged a code block, that tells you way more about what it's like to work with me at 2 p.m. on a Tuesday than a perfect portfolio piece does.
Exactly. It shows your thinking. And in 2026, how you think is the real asset.
And if we connect this back to the bigger picture, it's really about transparency. You're removing the mystery of who is this person by showing them exactly who you are when you're working.
So we've got your receipts for the past, and we have your plan for the future. Now I want to pivot to the psychological side of things. This third theme is what Mark Pierce calls persuasion.
Ah, this is fascinating. It's behavioral psychology applied to hiring. It's about priming the interviewer to see you as the solution before you even formally answer their questions.
I love this story from the guide. So Pierce was hiring for a client-facing role. High stakes. A candidate comes in, and instead of just saying, I'm good with clients, she had actually analyzed the company's website case studies.
And not just a quick glance.
No. In just 1 hour of research, she broke down 3 specific client types the firm deals with. She identified what triggers their decisions, and she mapped out how she would adapt her pitch to each one. She basically reverse-engineered their sales strategy.
And the result?
She got the job. Pierce called it persuasion because she removed the doubt. She answered the question, can she handle our clients? By showing she already understood them. Maybe better than some current employees.
Wow. She proved she thinks in outcomes, not just tasks. And this connects to something James Robbins mentions about unique value alignment.
Unique value alignment. That sounds a little buzzwordy. What does it mean in
Right.
practice?
It just means doing the self-work before you apply. It's not enough to be a good writer or a good coder. You have to articulate why your specific flavor of coding is exactly what this specific role needs right now. The candidate in the Mark Pierce story didn't just show she was smart. She showed she was smart for that specific job.
It's the difference between handing someone a generic master key and handing them a key that is cut specifically for their lock.
That is a perfect analogy. You have to fit the lock. And this leads to a great point made by Frederick S., a headhunter in the guide. He talks about untrainable drive.
This is the reality check for the AI era.
It really is. He argues that hard skills, Excel, Python, Salesforce, all of that can be trained or automated or outsourced. But drive, curiosity, loyalty, you cannot teach that.
You can't teach someone to give a damn.
Exactly. And when you do this level of research, when you bring a project or a client analysis, you are signaling that untrainable drive. You're showing you care enough to do the work before you're on the payroll. And in a pile of 500 resumes, that is a competitive advantage that no certification can give you.
It really separates the passengers from the drivers.
It does.
So we've covered a lot of strategies here. Receipts, plans, unasked for projects, persuasion. But how do we actually deliver this stuff? We can't just walk into an interview and dump a backpack full of papers on the table and say, "You're welcome."
No, please don't do that. That would be too much.
This brings us to our final theme, the readiness portfolio. Milos Eric suggests creating a dedicated asset for this.
Right. And this isn't your standard portfolio with, pretty pictures of past projects. He calls it a readiness portfolio.
Okay, so how is it structured? Walk us through the anatomy of this thing.
He suggests a one-page section right at the top with 3 specific goals, all featuring hard numbers. For example, boosted sales pipeline by 27%. Hit them with the metrics immediately, no fluff.
Okay, so lead with the receipts.
But then he suggests adding a future readiness section. This is really cool and very forward-looking. It's a list of new things you've learned recently, maybe a Scrum certification or a new AI tool, and crucially, how you plan to use them in the first 30 days of this job.
I love that. It links the credential to the application. It's not just, I have this cert. It's, I have this cert, and here's how it's going to help me fix your problem next month.
Exactly. It makes the credential active, not passive. He suggests putting this whole thing on a password-protected page, like on Notion or a personal website.
Password protected, why?
Psychology. Sending that link with a password, it feels exclusive. It feels professional. It feels like you're sharing confidential consulting document.
It feels like a consultant delivering a brief. That's brilliant.
And while we're on the topic of packaging your proof, Richard Gibson adds a very timely tip for early 2026.
The fresh recommendation strategy.
Yes. We're in February. People are just wrapping up their performance reviews from last year. The wins are fresh in everyone's mind. Now is the absolute best time to ask former supervisors for a fresh LinkedIn recommendation.
Because a recommendation dated February 2026 looks a lot more relevant to a hiring manager than one from 3 years ago.
It's third-party proof of your current readiness. It shows you haven't stagnated. It shows you were delivering value yesterday.
We have to touch on one last stat before we wrap things up. Kenneth Shin points at a number about the resume gap that actually made my jaw drop.
I know which one you're going to say.
He notes that 90% of resumes are missing specific achievements.
It is a staggering number. But if you flip it over, that's the opportunity.
Right.
It means that if you simply do the work we talked about today, if you include the receipts, the metrics, the specific outcomes, you are automatically in the top 10% of candidates. You don't have to be a genius. You don't have to have gone to an Ivy League school. You just have to be specific.
The bar is surprisingly low.
Yeah.
Hiring managers are just drowning in noise, drowning in generic hard workers. If you provide clarity, you win.
Clarity is the ultimate competitive advantage.
So let's bring this all together for the listener. We started by saying the resume is just paper, and the interview is a proposal.
Right. That's the mindset shift.
We've learned we need to kill the vague claims. No more strong communicator. We need those Alex-style receipts, the how and the metrics. We need to do the job before we get the job with a 30, 60, 90-day plan.
We need to shift from being an interviewee to being an operator.
And we need to use that psychological persuasion to show we understand their customer better than they expect. And then finally, package it all up in a readiness portfolio that proves you are ready to go on day one.
If I connect this all back to our learner profile, the person listening to this right now, it's really all about empathy. Not empathy for yourself, but empathy for the hiring manager.
They're overwhelmed. They're scared of making a bad hire.
Exactly. And clarity and specific evidence are the ultimate shortcuts to trust. When you provide proof, real, tangible proof, you are making the hiring manager's job easy. You're saying, you don't have to guess, here is the evidence. And in a risk-averse market, that is how you win.
I love that. Employers hire to reduce risk, and proof of work is the best risk mitigator.
It really is.
So here is the question I want to leave you with today. We've talked about treating the interview like a business proposal. So if you treated your next interview not as a Q&A session where you hope you get the right answers, but as a proposal presentation where you are the high-priced consultant, what specific receipt would you put on the table first?
That's the question.
Think about that. Go find your receipts. Thanks for diving in with us.
See you next time.
This has been From Dorms to Desks, job hunting tips for those early in their careers. A podcast brought to you by College Recruiter job search site, which believes that every student and recent grad deserves a great career. Each episode, we dive into tips, tricks, and insights that will help you land your next part-time, seasonal, internship, or entry-level job. Subscribe to this podcast for free now, so you don't miss an episode, and visit www.collegerecruiter.com to find your next great job.